Welcome to DPI Presents. I am excited today to have Julia Mullins with us. And this is an exciting conversation that we are going to have about our neurodiverse community and how each one of us as business leaders can be more inclusive. So, Julia, welcome today.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about your impact that you have with leaders.
Yeah, so I'm an executive coach. I came up through the leadership development space. And I think to sum it up, I would say I help leaders recognize their strengths, reframe workplace challenges, and own the moment, whatever that could mean for them in that moment.
Yes, I love that. I love that. When I had the opportunity to meet you in November and a little bit before that of 2023, I was just incredibly encouraged by the opportunity for someone who might have be a part of the neurodiverse community. Before we dive into that, tell me what exactly is the neurodiverse community for our audience that might be listening and not know even what that is.
I'm so glad you phrased the question that way because it helps us unpack some of this language. The
Yeah.
neurodiverse community is all of us. Neurodiverse includes neurotypical and neurodivergent. So, to talk more about the neurodivergent community, that's also a pretty broad swath of people, but that now focuses not on the neurotypical that falls under all of us. But it's not a single diagnosis. It's an umbrella term representing quite a few medical diagnoses, basically referring to how brains work differently. Under that umbrella, we include ADHD or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, autism or autism spectrum disorder,
Mhm.
generalized anxiety, depression, PTSD, a whole slew of acronyms that I could keep rolling. But basically, all of these different folks, and many folks have two or more diagnoses. Um, these people all kind of fall under that umbrella of what is neurodivergent. And the idea of community, I think, really started to come around in the 1990s.
Mhm.
A woman named Judy Singer was working on her thesis, and she saw parallels to other movements like women's rights and gay and lesbian rights, and thought the same concept could be applied to advocating for neurodiversity. And so over 25 years, this has gained momentum. And now when we think of this neurodivergent community, it's still kind of nebulous and just kind of out there in space.
Yeah.
But there's actually meetups and support groups and specialized programming and nonprofits dedicated to neurodiversity at large and different elements under that umbrella as well.
Wow, I love the fact that you said that we are all a part of this population, right? Like I had never heard that term, but it's good to know neurotypical and neurodivergent. So thank you for explaining that.
Yeah.
When you think about the neurodiverse and the neurodivergent population, what are some myths that we might have as leaders, as business owners? Because we know that where there are sometimes these diagnoses that might come as children or even as into our adulthood, that we have these myths in our own mind on how employees might be able to work or interact or what type of tasks they're able to do. So can you help us like kind of debunk some of the myths that are there
Let's
out
do
there?
it. I love
Yeah.
that. I think the biggest myth is that neurodivergent somehow means less than.
Mhm.
And I think that's the first thing we want to just squash right now.
Mhm.
There's a phrase that was attributed to Albert Einstein, but then proven he didn't say it. But it's like everyone is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, he'll live his whole life believing he's stupid.
Mhm.
And so if we think about that in the workplace, people work differently. And kind of accepting that and accepting neurodiversity is understanding that, um, we work differently, we need different things, we hear things differently. Some are more visual, some are more verbal. And so understanding that if somebody is not getting something, hold your thoughts on that person's really stupid or that person's really lazy and say maybe there's a different way to communicate with them to get this message across, and maybe we're just not connecting.
Mhm. That is so good. I'm actually going to be bringing in my sister, who is co-founder of DPI as well, to to talk about this subject as we continue. But I I am thankful that you are able to share with us just some of the myths of, like, someone is broken or there are things that they can't do. I think knowing that they can come into a space and just show up differently and providing them that space, we can talk more about how they are able to do that. But I think a lot of times business leaders will say, hey, I have this diagnosis, whether they have actually received a medical diagnosis or they're diagnosing themselves, because we always do kind of sometimes the Google diagnosis. They might say, hey, I got ADHD, I got adult ADHD, and I just get derailed with my time. What are some tools that business owners can use in regards to specifically the ADHD? Because I feel like I hear this more often than not, to be able to manage their time effectively.
Yeah. Time management always makes me smile because you're in consulting, you ask why a lot as well. You're always trying to get deeper than that.
Yes.
And that's my first question when it comes to time management. Is it really time management, or does the person just loathe the task, or do they not have enough context to see why this could matter? And these are crucial details to kind of getting to that time management. Many ADHDers have interest-driven brains, and while nobody loves a boring task, ADHDers truly cannot get motivated to start if it's not going to give them that dopamine. And other neurodivergent folks, autistic folks, and people that have more of a conceptual processing style, they will not be able to move forward without understanding how their task is fitting into the bigger picture. So maybe it's not time management, maybe it's articulating the value that they're providing and how it's plugging into something bigger than them. And then from that, you can sometimes tap into some of that dopamine and get excited about the value you're providing. But when it does come to time management, there are a few tools I love. One is called the Pomodoro method. And there's a website called tomatotimers.com. Free website, I love it. And it helps you tackle a to-do list and kind of break up something that maybe has been on your plate a little longer than it should have been. And the idea behind the Pomodoro method is that you have a set amount of work time followed by a scheduled break. Too often we can kind of get into a hyper focus and work for hours and then be burned out and say, I am not doing that again for a week. But that's not realistic. We have to get back on the horse. So
Yes.
This helps us balance. The default timer on that website is 25 minutes of work followed by 5 minutes of rest or distraction, but you can tinker with that. So if you think 40 minutes on, 10 minutes off is what works for you, you can totally schedule it that way. There's also a couple of visual timers that I love. I have two on my desk, actually. One of them, like, it turns orange, so it's a visual, so I can get heads down into something, but every time I look up, I can see, okay, like, I'm running out of time, stay on track there. And then this one, each side is a different amount of time. So like that one's 30 and it starts to count down. And so if that motivates people to stay on task and beat the clock, that can help too. A lot of folks with ADHD, and I think a lot of folks in general, I should say, have trouble estimating how long things take. We will not empty the dishwasher because it's going to take so long and it takes 4 minutes. Or we put something off till the end of the day because we think it'll take 20 minutes and it probably needs 2 hours of our time. So we under and overestimate. And so those timers can help with that too.
I think there are so many that might be listening thinking, oh, my teenager is thinking that 20-minute task, they really needed 2 hours for that studying. But I love, Renee, I know that you're joining the conversation. We have already discussed how we are all a part of the neurodiverse community. You could be neurotypical and neurodivergent. So this includes all of us. But I want, Julia, for you to explain, why are you so passionate? I think it was so rare to find someone who has a broad, being able to be an executive coach, but being able to really focus on this community where they might feel like sometimes they're not disclosing what their medical diagnosis is, and kind of feel alone in the workplace, whether it is, as you have taught us an umbrella term so it can cover anxiety, depression, ADHD, and many other different diagnoses. Why are you so passionate about this community?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think because this is not some community that's gated off somewhere that, is only interacting with each other. Neurodivergent individuals are woven throughout every facet of our lives. It might be family members or coworkers or clients. It could be the barista making our coffee in the morning. And I love developing leaders. I've been doing this for 15 years. And so the opportunity to focus on and support leaders that feel misunderstood or underrepresented in their workplace just feels like such a powerful way to connect and help those people with those leadership transitions and moving on up in the corporate world.
I love it. I was on your blog, and it's a very robust blog, and I thank you for all of the content that you're putting into this space. I know that we're going into conference season. March, April are very high concentrated conference seasons, and if we're trying to be more inclusive, which is something that DPI really stands firm on, that we can be inclusive in so many different ways outside of just race. How are we able to make our meetings or our conferences more inclusive of those that are a part of the neurodivergent community?
I love that. And I think everything that we can talk through, we could argue that it benefits everybody.
Yes, I
It's not
agree.
going to disadvantage anybody because we're catering to one audience. One of the things I personally love is the agenda ahead of time. Showing up to a conference and not knowing what's expected of me or where I'm supposed to be, that can be a little dysregulating. And so when conferences have an app or, they send out a program in advance so you can kind of pick your breakouts and, get your plans together, that
That's
really helps
me.
people. Yeah. I think we all thrive in owning our agenda. And so it also helps to help people show up prepared. Are they just listening? Are you expecting them to interact? And, even letting them know if laptops are not encouraged or they are and there's plugs provided. Those details are just clarity that everybody loves.
Yeah.
If the meeting's offsite, a lot of the bigger conferences are at hotels and conference centers. Maps are such a gift. I love maps. But I think that really helps people wrap their head around the space. Are the breakouts close together? Is it close to where I'm staying? All of these little questions that come up, you can just get ahead of it and let people focus on the content instead of the logistics once they get there. And I mentioned, these things help everybody. So having a map helps people know where the bathrooms are, know if there's a place to, pump milk if you're a nursing mother. All these different folks might find some value in the map. And if you don't like maps, don't open them. It's no big deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing, we were at that conference a few months back, and I don't know if
Yes.
you noticed, but on the side of the ballroom, there were some standing tables.
Yes.
And nobody was assigned seating there, but it was available to anybody who wanted to stretch their legs and kind of move around. And whether that's a physical thing that, your knee is locking up, or if it's a neurological thing that you're like, I need some stimulation, I got to do something, that offers that. And so just having that flexibility to let people walk around in the back of the room or stand on the side is really inclusive.
I love that. And you are right. When we were together at that conference, that was one beautiful detail that I noticed right away. And it was clearly marked, this standing table is not for trash, right? Because people might have
Right.
thought like this is where we put our empty coffee cup so that the wait staff is able to come and pick it up. It was clearly marked. And I tell you, that was a great way after you are sitting for a long time and you just want to kind of, get up and move around to be able to still be interactive with the session. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I actually just went to my local chamber meeting, and there was a speaker, and she provided fidget toys. Talk
Yes,
about
I love fidgets.
yeah, yeah.
That's great. Were people using them?
Yes, me being one, but yes,
Excellent.
they were. There was this one lady that I was sitting next to, and she was like, "Oh, I'm so hyperactive," and so she was like, "I love this," and so yes, she needed something to be able to, a stress baller. She's always looking for that type of kind of asset on table, so it was well received, especially because the lady who was speaking actually said, this is what this is for. Because some people might have thought, like, what are these toys for?
Right. Somebody
And
left this here.
like you said, the clarity. I know when I've gone to conferences before, I've done, and you and I did this, we were gathered together for a kind of know before you go. I think that's a great way to feel comfortable and then
Mhm.
already have met people. So when we saw each other, I was like, hey, Julia.
Yeah.
It was great to kind of already know people and not feeling that I was going to be alone as well. So were
I
there
agree.
um, any other items that you wanted to talk about in regards to making meetings or more inclusive?
I do have
Um,
a question
yeah.
if you don't think of something, and it's going to take us away from conferences. So if maybe this conversation will add something to it. But I, along my journey as an employer, have had a couple of employees that were in the neurodivergent community. And I don't know that I was well equipped to handle it at the time. And so I am thinking back to a situation where we're in a sales, at that time, in a sales environment. And part of what we do is we will go through scripts. And so we sit around together, the entire team, and we are going to just practice what we're going to say while we're on the phones or if we are in front of the customer. And I had an employee that was working for me and could not get past his name. He said his name, he walked away, removed himself, and then once he came out of the men's room, sat down and resigned and just said it was too much. He was extremely anxious. And so I did not ever even realize that, had not noticed that before. So, as employers, when you see something like that, because it wasn't anything that he had shared as far as a diagnosis with regard
Mhm.
to social anxiety or anxiety. So, when something like that happens, of course, the cost was I lost a team member.
Yeah.
And so, what do you do in situations like that to be more inclusive as a leader?
Yeah, that's tricky. But so many times people don't disclose and we can't expect them to. So um, I think similar to providing the agendas ahead of time for a meeting, if there's going to be scripts to provide those ahead of time so that he has a chance to read through it and practice, that could help. And I think if there's this expectation people need to read out loud, that can be shared in advance as well. Um, some of the diagnoses that I didn't cover under the neurodivergent umbrella is dyslexia and dysgraphia, kind of trouble with handwriting.
Okay.
Dyspraxia is kind of a clumsiness. And so there's all these other things going on. And so without knowing anything about this man, it might have been more than just anxiety. And so thinking
Okay.
through, you know, if the job is sales and he has to follow the script that's required, but how could we get to that script differently? And so maybe that is, recording yourself, doing a quick, like,
Mhm.
single person Zoom that he can watch and hear it and practice it instead of reading the page. Maybe he has a great memory and he would be golden moving forward. But yeah, that's tricky when they don't give you a second chance to try again. So
Yeah,
the best
no,
we
he
can do
was
is
just
moving forward, just try something a little different.
okay. Okay.
I know that
That's great.
we talked a lot about the ADHD, and we're going to be kind of wrapping up here. But um, what we have seen more in the workplace, I know when I was in corporate, I didn't hear the word anxiety. And I know, just like you said, and I love that you continue to say, these are different tools or things that we can do for all, not just a certain community, but for all of us, because we're all
Mhm.
a part of this community. When it comes to anxiety, and we definitely know that that is on the rise in our world, how can we be more sensitive, to that? I know for a meeting, definitely providing the agenda or even just the context of what that meeting is about, because I think we've all gotten that email from our supervisor saying, hey, we need to talk tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. and we're spiraling all night wondering what are we going to be talking about. But are there anything else in regards to anxiety where we can build kind of that sympathy, sensitivity, excuse me, and empathy towards that population?
Yeah, I think this is kind of a two-parter because there are things we can do as the manager or the leader, but then there's also things every individual wants to consider when it comes to self-advocacy. So as a leader, one of the skills that I love to see in leaders is emotional intelligence. And so some of that is kind of reading the body language and understanding that that person looks like really uncomfortable with this conversation. So instead of going deeper, how do we pull back and give them a little space? And just kind of noticing those things, which, so many companies are hybrid or remote right now. And so that is a little harder over Zoom with, delays and things like that. But to kind of pick up on that when people don't want to ask questions and don't want to engage, maybe there is something going on. Maybe their psychological safety is a little bit lower, and maybe that comes from a place of anxiety. But communicating one-on-one instead of in front of the group is probably a great way to start, to say, hey, maybe you weren't showing up the way you wanted to, but I just wanted to see if there's more I can do as your leader to engage you differently in this workshop or meeting.
Yeah, I love that. So when we think about working with an executive coach, and I know you're going to give us all the ways that we can stay in touch with you, what are the benefits of that? Like, when should someone seek out the assistance of a coach? I know when I've used it in my career, the reason I started my business was because of the executive coach that I had, that was truly a partner in helping me understand my skill set, what was transferable after I was laid off. But when should leaders, business owners, um, middle level managers, first time managers, when should they reach out for an executive coach?
Yeah, I mean, perfect world, we would all have coaches at every step of our career. I mean, if we can, wish for that, that would be great. But if we have to get specific, I would say if you're looking at some sort of transition, whether that's changing jobs, getting promoted, taking on new responsibilities, all of those things come with a lot. You're navigating a new environment, you're trying to figure things out, and you're trying to step into your own leadership brand, whatever that is. It's evolving. And so the way a friend or a colleague might tell you things, a coach is helping you unlock what you know and figure out what you're capable of by addressing your strengths and helping to remove any roadblocks that are holding you back.
Nice. Well, Julia, thank you so much. This has been incredible to just talk with someone who is so successful as you are in this space. And I want our viewers to understand, how do we stay in touch with Julia?
Yeah. Well, I know you mentioned the blog a few times, and thank you. So that's available to everybody if you go to mullinsprofessionalgroup.com. My blog is right there on the website. And then I also am, I run programs sometimes, and so you can find, different information on that as well. But there's about 50 articles on the blog that can help you continue this conversation, and I am always willing to talk more about it. So
Yes.
people can
So
reach out.
mullinsprofessionalgroup.com. I know you
Yep.
have a Lead with ADHD program. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I would love to. So that kind
Yeah.
of came out of, being in leadership development for the last 15 or so years. I'd been building these programs, and admittedly, maybe I wasn't making them as neuro-inclusive as possible. And so hindsight 2020, I started to build my own thing. And in 2021, I built this first iteration of Lead with ADHD, which is a leadership development program with this foundation of ADHD education and acceptance. And so I've run open cohorts and I've run it through companies, but basically it's a couple of sessions between 4 and 8, depending on how much content you want. But we talk about neurodiversity and ADHD and how it shows up both at work and in every other chapter of our life. It includes a couple self-assessments to really get to know ourselves based on the data, not just kind of what we see in the mirror, because we all have blind spots. And we talk about how to best leverage those strengths. We talk about some neuroscience basics. I just love this part of it, because it just kind of comes back to the basics of how we can take better care of our brain and how that serves us better in the workplace. And then a big thing, we mentioned executive presence earlier, I think. And so, you know, some of those skills like communication and emotional intelligence, they all roll up to something bigger. And so we talk a lot about executive presence and where ADHD might be hindering and where we can kind of further support ourselves. And we walk away with a personal development plan to turn those insights into action.
I love that. Listen, our DPI community, we are together to be able to provide resources. And Julia, you definitely are such an instrumental resource provided for leaders in this moment in history. So I thank you for being with us. Renee, is there anything else that you wanted to say? You're on mute, I think.
I was on mute, sorry. Nothing else, man. The time flew. It's like I have more questions, but I want to respect your time, and I thank you for being here as well.
Well, I'm happy to come back for a part 2. I love chatting with you ladies, and I love talking about neurodiversity. So
we'll have to take you up on that.
Yes. So for our viewers, whether it is morning, afternoon, or evening, we hope that you have gained some incredible gems. There will be more conversations around our neurodiverse community. To Julia, you can reach her at mullinsprofessionalgroup.com, learn more about her lead with ADHD program. Her blog is phenomenal. I think every leader should definitely be on there and understanding resources that are available to you. There are links to those toys that you might want to add for your next conference or meeting. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, morning or afternoon, depending on when you are viewing this. All of the show notes will be below in our comment section. Be well.